I'm here today with Clarence Shuler and Gary Chapman. Clarence is the president and CEO of Building Lasting Relationships, a nonprofit focused on building mutually beneficial connections. He's authored 10 books, and he and his wife Brenda conduct marriage, men's, women's, and singles seminars internationally. Gary Chapman is the best-selling author of the Five Love Languages series and director of Marriage and Family Life Consultants Incorporated. Clarence and Gary are co-authors of a new book titled Life-Changing Cross-Cultural Friendships, How You Can Help Heal Racial Divides One Relationship at a Time. You can learn more about Clarence at clarenceshuler.com and Gary and his work at fivelovelanguages.com. So, gentlemen, welcome, and it's really an honor and privilege to be able to speak with you, and congratulations on all you've accomplished.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. We're glad to be with you.
Well, because of, all the work that I do, but in particular, how to heal our divides, this book that you've come up with just seems like exactly the type of thing that I want to highlight and share with people and let them find out, we all need to heal divides, particularly racial divides. And, learning more about how you all did that over a period of decades, I think is really important. So if we could each of you just kind of give a little bit more about your background than what I briefly touched on?
Yeah. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. When I met Gary, it was pretty segregated. I met Gary in 1968. So at that time, it was very segregated, our communities. And I think Gary is about 50% black and white in Winston-Salem back then. So I grew up in church. I was not a Christian initially, but I was a drug baby. Every time doors to the church were open, my parents drugged me to church. And so, but had a really good father and mother and older sister. So, and a great community. One of the neat things about our segregated community, everybody knew each other. So there was really a lot of affirmation to be successful. And there was a real big emphasis on sports, but even a bigger emphasis on academics. So that was sort of my background.
Cool.
Yeah, I actually moved to Winston-Salem in 1967. I finished my PhD and I came to teach in a small college here, and also was working part-time at a church as a youth minister. And so Clarence and I actually met in the church gymnasium. So Clarence, you can tell him how you got there.
Okay. Well, Brian, I saw you smiling, but in North Carolina, you have basketball, tobacco, and Baptist, pretty much in that order. And so my friend Russell was going to a predominantly white school. I was going to an all black school. And some girls at the church where Gary was youth pastor, I guess, were being evangelistic and invited him to come to church, to the gym, because we all played basketball. So it was a real big deal in our community for us to go to a white church. We had a family town hall meeting, and my mother, after a couple of hours, finally let us go. And then we crossed the railroad tracks and were greeted with bottles and all kind of names. But when we got to the church, we walked in, and sure enough, we were only two black kids there out of about 100 kids. And so Russell knew some of the girls, so he went to talk to them. I saw the basketball court, so I headed there because that was my area of safety. But I did see some of the adults very concerned, and I went to the court, and then this tall, slender guy came over to me and offered his hand and say, "Hey, I'm Gary Chapman. Glad you're here." And that made me feel a little safe and a little bit better. But it was an interesting time. I was a little concerned because we were really outnumbered. But that's how I met Gary.
Yeah, those were really days of tension in our city. I remember one morning I woke up and went outside where I was living, and the National Guard was there. The Ku Klux Klan had been marching downtown until the Black Panthers came. And there was just a lot of tension. This integration was just taking place. And when Clarence and his friend Russell walked in, some of our adult leaders looked at me and kind of pointed, like, "Do you see them?" And I kind of raised my hand like, it's okay. And so, as Clarence said, I went over and met them. And then after we played a while, and we always had a little meeting in which I'd pull the kids together and ask some questions and discuss some things. And at any rate, when it was all over that night, I just said to the two guys, I said, "Hey guys, we're here every Tuesday night, and you guys are always welcome." And Clarence and Russell started coming, just on a regular basis. And later on, I don't know, almost 2 years later, I guess, we had a weekend retreat, and they signed up to go to the retreat. And I had a few phone calls from parents, what's this I hear, black going to all that retreat, And I said, listen, these guys are our friends. We've known them for 2 years. And I understood, the parents, they had all these ideas. But anyway, we had a great time there. And Clarence really personally came to give his life to Christ there. And so that really, kind of knitted our hearts together. And we started meeting together on a regular basis at my house. And so, it just went step by step by step, and it's 54 years now that we've had a relationship. So it's just been super, super exciting.
Can you just imagine what today's world would be like if the majority of people had taken that same type of approach in 1968?
Yeah, it'd be, Brian, a couple of things that would intrigue me was the way Gary taught the scriptures. I'd gone to Sunday school and what do you call Baptist Training Union, you would call it BTU, but Gary would actually ask questions and he really wanted to hear what we had to say, as opposed to just kind of parroting out an answer, the right answer. And so that was intriguing. And it also was short. I think it was 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't like forever. And then I think when he shared the gospel with me when I accepted Christ, when he started quoting John 3:16, he says, for God so loved Clarence. And I said, Gary doesn't go like that. And he said, well, Clarence, when God's thinking about the world, he's thinking about you. And that just really, that whole idea of a personal relationship really intrigued me. And then after that, like he said, he began to disciple me. And I was worried for him because when I went to his house, again, I had to go into a white neighborhood, which was difficult, but I saw his neighbors look at him and I was concerned for his safety when I came to his house because I'd meet him every Saturday morning. We'd do stuff on the back porch.
But again, for you guys to be able to have the courage, both directions to do what you did at that point in time, in that context, was significant. And I mean, I just can't, fathom almost that wasn't the reaction of the majority of Christians, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Why in the world have we not been able to accomplish this, to rid ourselves, of the racism that has just continued to rear its ugly head left and right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Clarence and I, when we were writing this book, we're just reflecting on where we are now in this country and just asking, are we any better than we were in the late 60s? Yes, a lot of good things have happened, and integration into schools and other things have been very, very positive. But friendship across racial lines is still not all that common. And it's just been so enriching to us that we've asked ourselves, what if every individual had at least one close personal friend of a different race or culture? We believe it'd make a tremendous difference in our culture.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I've heard statistics from, a number of folks that have said what you just said, Gary, that most Americans don't have any kind of a meaningful relationship with someone else from another race. And it's like, how can we hope to understand each other?
Yeah.
Right? And cooperate and everything else that's required, given all the tough issues that we have, unless that's the case, unless you actually listen to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think that's a priority for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a priority for the church. When Gary opened his house to me and everything, I was really intrigued because here's a place that was forbidden and now I'm going to this community. So I don't know if I was brave. I think he was because he was an adult and I think he knew more of the risks. But I'm a teenager. I'm 16 years old at the time he introduced me to Christ. And so you're invincible when you're a teenager, but also this whole new world that I did not have privy to. Now I'm having privy to. So it was amazing. And it was amazing watching my parents learn to trust Gary. Back then, Blacks were a lot more religious and had greater respect. And so since he was a minister, they trusted him to take care of me. But it was interesting watching them learn to love him and trust him.
So, you guys clearly have had this relationship for a long, long time. What motivated you to write this book about it?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I had some friends and I was doing some speaking at a marriage conference for an organization. And there were some volunteers at this organization in a city that was torn by racial tension, uh, much worse than Winston-Salem in some ways. And the lady asked me, she said, if you and Gary have this great friendship, you guys ought to write a book together. And so I began to ask Gary about doing it. And Gary's a pretty humble guy. Don't tell him I said so. But anyway, and so he felt like I'm not really qualified. And I said, yes, you are. And so eventually, I think in 2017, we agreed to do it. But he was busy writing, I was writing. So we finally got it done. And but really, she said, but if you guys modeled your friendship, I think it would give people something to look at as to how to build these cross-cultural friendships, because we need to improve race relations. And we can't do it through theories. We can't do it through politics. We've got to have real close friendships.
Yeah. Friendships cannot be legislated. We can legislate a lot of changes, and we have, and that's good. And I applaud those who have worked toward those things. But you can't legislate friendships. It's a matter of the heart. And individually, across racial lines, we have to have a heart to realize, people of other cultures and other races are important. They're made in God's image, and let's take a step, in that direction. And so, and in the book, we try to be really clear about if you do begin a relationship, and it typically begins with a conversation. We all have acquaintances, at work or at sports or at church. We say, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. How are you? But we don't even know their name sometimes. So we say, let's just start a conversation with someone that you run into in any context, and it all starts with a conversation. One conversation might lead to a second conversation. It might lead, not all of them, and it might go down the road, and before long, you really are interested in each other, wanting to know each other, help each other. And that's what friendship's all about. Each of you are trying to understand the other person, their perspective, on life and culture, and then also how we can help each other, how we can enrich each other's lives.
So, obviously your friendship goes back, a long ways. I mean, is the book kind of a co-memoir, or how is it organized?
Well, we tell bits and pieces of our story. Yeah, I think it's more of our story when we first start out, but it actually goes, it's not a binary book. It's not just about black and white. We deal with several different cultures, and we tell stories that other people have told us and we share. So we start out a little bit with our friendship, kind of laying a foundation, but the book is not just a memoir about our friendship. It's just how you make cross-cultural friendships. We even use Jesus and a Samaritan woman, and we pull out some biblical principles, how Jesus how he made a cross-cultural friendship that was pretty risky for him to do. I mean, he broke some man-made traditions to do that. So I think you'll find it really good, but again, not a binary book, not just about black and white. It's very, I think, inclusive.
Yeah, we also try to be honest that when you do have cross-cultural friendships, you will run into conflicts along the way. I tell the story about the time I went by Clarence's house to pick up him and another friend of his named James. And I pulled up in front of their house with my car and got out of my car and started toward the porch. And I said, you boys ready to go? And his friend James said, I ain't no boy. And I said, okay, James, I think I need to listen to you. And as soon as the meeting's over, because we were going to a meeting, I said, after it's over, let's you and me and Clarence sit down and talk, because I need to hear what you're feeling, man. Mm-hmm. And they explained to me, how their fathers were called boys by adult men, white men, and they'd always been told, don't let white people call you a boy.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand that. I said, man, I get it. Man, I'm sorry. I had no intention of putting you down. And because I listened to them and identify with what they were saying, then they listened to my side, And if I were picking up two white guys that were your age, I'd say boys, because in my mind, boys is an age, has nothing to do with race. Mm-hmm. But once we understood each other, then I was sensitive to their perspective. They were sensitive to mine, and our friendship then continued. But we have to learn to work through those kind of conflicts. But that's all part of it. It's learning to see the other person's perspective.
And so is the book kind of a series of role models, of examples like that? Is that the way we should think of it?
Yeah, we do give role models. For example, I was at a CEO breakfast this week, and one of the guys who read the book, he said, my favorite chapter is one on apology, on apologizing to each other from a cross-cultural perspective. And we do get some series, some incidents, most where I've messed up and made some mistakes cross-cultural. We talked about that and what we can learn from that. So it's a really informative book. And what we think it does, we think it takes away, or at least it lessens some of the fear of building a cross-cultural friendship with someone you don't know or someone you may not understand.
Yeah, we also talk about different types of friendships and different levels of friendship. You know, there are golfing buddies, for example, that they would say they're friends because on the golf course they talk together, you know, they share life with each other. And that's good. That's wonderful. That's a level of friendship. But many times if one of them has to drop out of, you know, of the foursome and they don't meet regularly, they might get a call or two from the other guys. But after that, after a couple of months, that person never hears from them again. So it was a friendship, you know, but it was a temporary friendship and it was based around, you know, common interest. And often it can start there, you know, but we want to see people move beyond that so that we become long-term friends, you know, and share life in every possible way with each other. But we applaud all of those steps, you know, along the way. You know, there are people who have, for example, friends at work. And they say, you know, George, oh yeah, he's a friend of mine, he's at work. But that means they might have lunch together once in a while. You know, it means they might go to the same meetings, but they probably don't know that each other's children's names or, you know, or much else about them. So it's a level of friendship and it's positive, but, you know, we're just saying, let's look at the levels, but let's talk about how we can go deeper.
Well, it's always been, you know, I'll say politically correct, you know, to stay away from certain topics. You know, I mean, if you have a more superficial relationship, at least like in a work environment, I grew up in corporate America, and it's like there were three things that we were not supposed to talk about, you know, sex, religion, and politics. And, you know, so the tough stuff, you know, you kind of have to have more than a superficial relationship with someone in order to really have a meaningful discussion.
Well, that's true. And one of the things we touch on is even words that might not be appropriate. For example, the word colorblind. You know, I do a lot of diversity training for organizations. And almost in the first session when I'm training, someone will say, I'm colorblind. Well, then I will follow that up with, well, what color is your shirt or what color is your car? And they can tell me. And then I say, well, hold up, time out. How are you colorblind? But you know, you can determine colors. And they will say, a lot of them will say, well, you know, I treat everybody the same and I just want to make sure I don't see color. And depending on the relationship, but we talk about in the book, a lot of people of color are really offended by that because they say, if you don't see color, then you don't see me. Or if you're colorblind, what are you basing a relationship on? And so, and then when we think about God really create diversity, then it really has a bigger impact. So we talk about that so people at least sensitive to that, hey, that may not be the best word to use in a cross-cultural relationship if we don't understand. But I think asking the question, learn to work through conflict, which we talk about, helps you build a close relationship because one of the benefits of conflict's not always bad, is that you learn one more thing about that person than you knew before, which helps you be a better friend or in the context of marriage, a better husband or a better wife. So we really ask people to embrace that. And that's part of the building relationships.
So we touched on this earlier, but I'd like to dive in a little bit deeply. What do you think that churches should be doing, you know, around this issue?
Well, this Sunday, I'm actually co-preaching with a guy at his request on ethnicity. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, which you actually go into great detail in our book and talk about the spiritual gifts. And what we're going to do, the text talks about spiritual gifts, but we're going to make some applications from that. And the goal of spiritual gifts is that not everyone has the same gift, but it's really about interdependency. And when you have that interdependency, that creates a unity. And I think that's what glorifies God. Because then we see, I need Gary in my life. And Brian, if we were in a church or something, I would need you in my life because of your spiritual gift. It's not for you, it's for me. So we really think churches need to really do that. I think they need to do more than just exchange pulpits or have choirs sing. I think what I would do, I would have the two choirs create a song together because that's going to create conflicts. Yeah. And they're going to have to apologize. But if they put a song together and come back and present it, a lot of stuff has gone through. They're going to have conflict, ask for forgiveness. It's going to really be powerful. And it's, so whoops. So I think they have to do more things like that, and not just, even though exchanging pulpits is a nice thing, but I think we have to go deeper.
Yeah, I think those kind of situations can bring people together when they wouldn't have been together. But hopefully out of those, there would be some real friendships that would begin to grow when you meet one of those persons and you begin to have a relationship with them. I really think, Brian, that most Christians in today's world are asking, what can I do to help? I mean, whatever the culture, what can I do to make things better in our country in terms of relationships across the cultural and racial lines? And one of the things we're saying is, here's one thing that you can do. Every individual has the potential of building a friendship with someone of a different race or culture. And one by one, if we get enough people who are doing this, it will begin to infect the rest of the culture. So that's our heart. That's our vision.
Well, Brian, we are hoping that people will buy the book and have small groups. And whether the groups are all one culture or not, but the group will talk about stuff and give them the courage after they go through the book to go out cross-culture, to pray about developing cross-cultural friendships. And so it'll be a motivation thing. And at least if we get people talking cross-culturally, I think it's going to lower some of the racial tension in America if we do that. But I think churches should lead out on that. So I think it was Gary's idea. So we need to write it to the church, because the church should model this, because we have the Holy Spirit and the Word of God. So we should really reflect that.
Yeah, I would hope also that churches that have more than one staff member, that the staff would read this together and discuss it together and talk about what can we as a leadership staff of the church do to expose and challenge our people, to this concept.
Hey, one thing real quick, Brian. Gary, you may not know this, but in Chattanooga, remember we did the Love Language Conference that Saturday?
Mm-hmm.
That pastor is a large white church. It has a friendship with a black pastor, and they've all got the books. And so they and their staffs are going through the book together. They're meeting once a week to go through the book together to try and improve. And I thought it was really cool and kind of unique.
Yeah, that's great.
There needs to be more than that, more of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think as one of you said earlier, it's like there more people need to care about this, because it's such a deep-seated, long-standing issue that has not gone away.
Yeah.
And if anything, over the last few years, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And the church, I think, should really be in the lead of dealing with this, not sweeping it under the rug, not claiming colorblindness, when it's just so clear that does not exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of group discussions, though, is there a discussion guide that goes along with this, or is it more embedded in the book itself?
Well, we have a video that's that actually helps small groups. It doesn't deal with every chapter, but sort of groups things together, that Gary and I actually have videoed and try to encourage small groups to do it. But most of it really is embedded in the book itself, because at the end of every chapter, there are questions to go through and process to see where you are and why you are where you are. And then hopefully that will lead you to where do I go from here?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if you look forward for a minute, do you guys have plans to do any follow-on books or any other joint projects on this topic?
If I can go Gary's schedule, I would.
Brian, I would mention one other book that we did together a few years ago.
Okay.
It's called Choose Greatness, 11 Wise Decisions That Brave Young Men Make. And it's a book written to young men, from 12 years to 20 years. And the underlying thesis is the decisions you make in these years are going to impact the rest of your life. And so we're kind of laying out these 11 decisions and challenging them to make wise decisions. And we're encouraging them, if they have a father in the home, for the father and the son to read it and discuss it together. And if they don't have a father in the home, maybe their mom or their grandmother can help them find what we call a trusted adult man, who can read it with them, maybe somebody at church or some other organization. and discuss it with them, because we believe, we could save a lot of wrecks for young men if we could help them make wise decisions in those years.
And Brian, one of the chapters in that book actually talks about how to create diverse friendship at an early age. So we do talk about that in that book. And what's unique about that book is that we were able to get the publisher graciously change the cover to represent diversity on the cover. And that spiked the sales when people saw themselves, because people of color, if we don't see ourselves on the book, sometimes we feel we're not included. Or if it's a really great author that we respect, we say, well, we'll read it, but we got to translate it so it make it for us. So the fact that Moody was really gracious to change the cover just really makes it feel more inclusive. And again, it's not a binary cover. We actually represent 4 different cultures on the cover of the book.
Great idea. Great idea. Well, I really am glad you guys have done this. And, I'm really glad you're out there promoting it, to get more people to adopt it, churches in particular. So, thank you so much for, bringing this to our culture and our society and the healing that it'll bring.
Well, thank you, Brian. And really appreciate, what you're doing to get books like this out there in front of people. We're all in the family together. We can help each other, and that's what you're doing.
Amen.
Yeah,
so again, the title of the new, I'm sorry, go ahead, Clarence.
I was just going to echo what Gary said. We really appreciate what you're doing, trying to heal racial divides and political divides, all those different things. So thank you again for what you're doing.
Well, certainly. I mean, there's nothing more important, I don't believe, that I could be doing, honestly. Yeah. So I want to try to help however I can. So again, the name of the new book is Life-Changing Cross-Cultural Friendships, How You Can Help Heal Racial Divides, One Relationship at a Time, by Clarence Shuler and Gary Chapman. You can learn more at clarenceshuler.com and 5lovelanguages.com. Thanks again, gentlemen. Appreciate all your work.
Well, thanks again for having us.